Hi there, and welcome to Ella Merrill. My name is Merrill, and I like to do deep dives into the latest research on neurodiversity.
And I'm Alistair. I'm a psychotherapist, and I love creating the metaphors and stories that help make sense of it all.
And together, we're exploring how neurodiversity shapes our lives. Let's get started.
This episode of Alan Merrill is brought to you by my co-pilot AI for when your willpower won't. You know, those 2 a.m. moments when you're supposed to be going to sleep, but you can't stop doom scrolling. Or when you're stuck on the sofa with your phone after work. Well, my co-pilot AI is your personal AI co-pilot that can help you get on with the things that you really want and need to do exactly in those moments. Whether that's doing the laundry, getting on with your projects or hobbies, or just actually going to bed, my co-pilot AI can help you with all of this. Check it out at https://mycopilot.ai. That's mycopilot.ai for when your willpower won't.
Just a note to say that we're explorers and storytellers. This podcast is not intended as therapy, advice, recommendation, or medical authority. We are just like you, inviting you along on our journey of trying to make a little sense out of fascinating research on neuroscience and neurodiversity as best as we can.
So what are we talking about today? I have done my ADHD thing and not at all done any of the reading or the research. So I'm hoping you're going to turn up with some fascinating stuff that
Absolutely.
I can completely just make up stories around like I do.
Yeah, I have written down stuff on actually 3 pretty different topics. The first one is that last time we talked about vitamin D3 and how that impacted, like there was found a correlation between deficiency in D3 and autism and the severity of the symptoms. And then we wondered what exactly does vitamin D3, because both of us didn't really know what it did. And you were also saying that usually it is recommended to take vitamin D3 combined with K2. So I also looked up what that is. So I thought we might start with that one because it's quite simple.
Okay, so a report.
Short report on that one. So it's quite simple. Vitamin D3 basically has 2 major functions. One is calcium regulation and one is immune function. So it interacts with immune cells through the vitamin D receptor in both T and B cells, macrophages and dendritic cells. And
I'm going to smile and nod to all of those. What do they mean?
Sure. So it basically, vitamin D3 is very important. So T and B cells and macrophages, they all work in the immune system. So they're very important for attacking all intruders in the body.
So they're a different type of immune cell, basically.
They are immune cells, and those have vitamin D receptors on their membrane, I suppose. So vitamin D is required for activating them, I think.
So vitamin D is like the signal fire that goes, yo, wake up, like out of bed, people, we've got shit to do.
I guess so. It's kind of the food of the cells, I think, that something they need to function.
Okay, or it's like war drugs. You know, when they send soldiers into battle, they usually pump them full of all sorts of stimulants and shit.
This is drawn so far out of context.
It's all about the story. It's making it comprehensible and easy to understand, right? It's like, okay, you know, there's some really, like, chemistry is crazy. Like, when you visualize it and see what's going on, it's such a complex world. Like, you look at it and as a human being, you see and understand it. You can see the movement of this stuff and go, that shit's alive, you know? But it's complex and it's like got mad levels of structure, and yet it's microscopic. It's absolutely tiny. We forget just how much stuff, like, you know, the structures that we see in our lives, like houses and trains and, you know, briefcases and stuff and like clothes and random stuff, and we're like, oh, this is really complex life. Like, stuff at the microscopic level is just as complex with just as much crazy structure, and we forget that it's like a whole world underneath our world or inside. Or
and it's so abstract that it's really difficult to kind of put it.
I'm trying to make it like, yeah, this is like an equivalent, because that shit's different. Yeah, anyway, carry on.
One thing is that it's important for activating those T and B cells to actually kill the intruders, but then it also influences cytokine production, which is important for promoting T helper cells. So T helper cells have a different task. They kind of regulate the amount of T and B cells that's active in the immune response, which means that if there are sufficient T helper cells present, then this potentially reduces autoimmunity, because if the number of T and B cells that is activated in your immune response explodes, like gets dysregulated basically, then there's a high probability of autoimmunity because there's too much. There's the immune
Right.
system is going in overdrive. So these T helper cells are also required to tune that down a bit to make it happen at the level that you want it to happen, but not too much.
Okay. So my image for that is a sort of cross between my crazy soldiers who are on drugs being sent to the war zone and, like, you know, park runs where you have the people, the marshals who stand there with their vests and going, it's this way, go this way. You know, when the runners come up and they're like, to the left, to the left. And if you don't have them, what happens is that the runners just go all over the place. And because these runners are also, you know, completely drugged up soldiers and want to kill loads of stuff, them going all over the place is kind of a bad idea. You want them to kind of go where they're told to go, pointed at. So you need good marshals to send them to the right place.
Exactly. And then you need vitamin D3 to both have the soldiers and the marshals active.
So that's like the coffee that makes it, because these guys all run like super early in the morning when it's still cold and misty outside. So they're clearly on some kind of substance to stimulate them out of bed in the morning. So, because, you know, no ordinary human being does that, do they? I know that some people are early birds, but I'm sure that's only like 4%. I like it. I'm attached to this image. I think it's cute.
Okay, so now we're going to a different topic. I'm curious already what story you're going to make of this. So vitamin D3, as I said, has kind of two major things that is busy with. One is immune function, which I just explained. The other one is calcium regulation. And this is why it is combined with vitamin K2, because K2 and D3 collaborate to direct calcium to bones. So basically, vitamin D it works for calcium absorption. So from the food, I suppose, that you eat, the vitamin D is important to get the calcium from the food, or otherwise, I don't know, it absorbs calcium. While vitamin K helps bind it to bones via osteocalcin.
That's interesting. I'm surprised that it's just bones. Is it just bones? Is there nothing? Because I know that calcium is also super important for nerves, right? It's a big thing in the nervous system because of the way that a nerve transmits electricity. If I remember this right, is like sodium, calcium, and potassium or something like that. And it's the shifting of that across boundaries in the gaps between the myelination sheaths on a nerve that literally transports the electric potential energy. So it's like there's a gate, and then there's another gate, and then there's another gate. And at each gate, you have to get the calcium, the potassium, and the sodium, whatever it is, to cross boundaries, and that makes the next gate do the crossing boundaries, and the next, and that's how it moves along. So calcium is super important for nerve function. So everything in brains and nerves is.
Maybe this explains. So vitamin D3 is important for getting the calcium.
So I used to take a lot of vitamin D, and my aunt is an epidemiologist, so she's like super smart when it comes to medical stuff. And she said, "Oh, be careful! You should get yourself checked out for calcification." So if you take a lot of vitamin D, then
that is what K2 does.
You get calcification in your, like, literally in your nervous system, in your brain, your pituitary gland, which is a bad idea. So if K2 makes sure that that is being absorbed by the bones instead of everywhere else, then it's kind of like, it's like stopping it from, so like a sort of cleaner.
Exactly. So K2 makes sure that it's not sticking to the size of your blood vessels.
So if my little dumb analogy here is looking at the autumn leaves outside, is that K2 is like a little bit of a sweeper of the dead leaves. So vitamin D makes like calcium dead leaves go everywhere, which obviously sticks everywhere, and then people start slipping over and having crashes, and God forbid you're on a bicycle on a bunch of wet dead leaves. K2 turns up and basically goes, this stuff has a better place to be, and like sort of like put it on a compost heap or something, which is your bones. Your bones are now compost heaps in this lovely metaphor. All right, it kind of makes sense. So it helps prevent the negative side effects of taking too much vitamin D or taking more vitamin D. So you get the benefits, but not the negative consequences.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why K2 is advised to be taken together if you take vitamin D3 supplementation.
I have been taking my vitamin D3 and K2 supplements.
Very good.
Lately, because of our conversation. I may not have remembered a lot of details, but I'm like, yeah, I'm taking it.
I've actually only taken D3 for some time, so I'm probably very calcified by now. I should be taking KT as well.
Yeah, and there's interesting amounts on there's interesting discussions that I've had on like how much is a good amount. Because I know that a lot of the vitamin D3 pills that you get are actually really low, like 500 whatever units they are, like micrograms or whatever it is. And I used to take 10,000 because I went to a doctor and actually he literally said, you must go on holiday immediately somewhere sunny. This was like in January or February. I was living in Scotland. And basically he was like, you are so low on vitamin D. Like the bar is like, I can't remember the details, but it's something like you've got to have like 300 in your blood. And I had 50 or something like that. And he literally like, you need to go on holiday now. And I was like, I can't afford to do that. I'm a student. And he was like, in that case, you need to start making vitamin D like hard. So I was taking 10,000 units, micrograms, milligrams, nanograms. And yeah, that was when I got warned that might be a calcification, like that, when it's that much, it can induce calcification.
That's good that you were notified then.
Yeah, I had no clue. They didn't warn me about that at all.
I think that's basically most of the vitamin D3 that we were wondering about. And then there was also another experiment, or I think there were at least two experiments with rats where they tested the vitamin D levels in mom rats getting babies. And it seemed to be super essential for the development of brain structure and growth, being very important for normal brain development and very likely to be related to neurodevelopmental disorders. So the vitamin D levels in pregnant moms, rat moms, at least for the development of the brains of the baby rats. So yeah, she mentioned that this is a rat study, of course, is not a humans, but
yeah, but nerves are pretty damn similar. Okay, so my take home here is that vitamin 3 is basically like a fundamental substrate for like good nerve function, and therefore, given that brains are made out of nerves, neurons, the vitamin D is basically, if you want a good, healthy nervous system and neural system, like vitamin D is important in that mix, but you don't want to take too much of it. So you want to balance it with your K2 to make sure that as you take enough to be healthier, you don't get the side effects. Keep it nice and clean.
Some other articles that I initially thought were not super related, but I now realize that this actually kind of very much relates to what we are talking about now. That there are say multiple things at the same time. That doesn't work.
Yeah. The struggle of words one after the other.
It kind of relates to the RCCX, but not that specifically, not specifically the RCCX theory, but rather the comorbidity between autoimmunity and neurodiversity, where multiple articles imply that immune cell infiltration across the blood-brain barrier. So there's different parts of your body that have a barrier between the blood and tissue. One of these, and that's mainly the most important parts of the body that have this barrier. One of them is the brain, but it's also, for example, in the testicles that also have it because, of course, you don't want very dangerous things to go into your offspring, right? So there's a few parts of the body that have a very strict barrier between the blood and the tissue. One
and
of them
the
is the brain.
reason for that is to make sure that any toxins that get into the blood, like if you get a cut somewhere, you get a bacterial infection. Actually, also just generally, human beings have always had vast amounts of parasites in their blood, right? Like most of our immune system is actually designed. One of the reasons we have like asthma, people believe, is that our immune systems are actually designed to deal with a parasitic load that we don't currently experience. So historically, we would have had like nematodes in our blood, bacteria in our blood, viruses just kicking around, like stuff that we drunk in the water that got through our digestive system. So actually our blood is, like in evolutionary history, not very clean. Like it's sort of a bit of a sewer that we pump around the body, transporting all the, like a canal, right? Canals are dirtiest, right, compared to rivers because they're a bit unnatural. But canals are just disgusting. But we need them to transport the stuff in them, but they also have muck in them. So these blood-brain barriers are there to make sure that the muck that's in the transportation system of the blood doesn't get into the hypersensitive areas where you're like, actually, this needs to be super clean. Like sort of like a clean, like washing your hands before you get in somewhere like a restaurant.
Exactly. And there is a bunch of articles that suggest that individuals with ASD have changes in the blood-brain barrier. And as you also mentioned last time, I think, is that there's also a very high comorbidity between neurodiversity and the bowel system.
Like leaky gut syndrome. And basically, if crap can get across your digestive system faster, because we put food in us that's full of life that isn't necessarily good for us, and ideally that would be killed, digested, pooped out. But if our gut lining isn't in the greatest health, and especially if you've got a very Western diet, it won't be, right? Because we've utterly trashed our gut health. Then it leaks into the blood. And if we also have blood-brain barrier problems, then basically it's like two doors that this bad stuff can get through. And if both of them are not working 100% effectively, then ultimately that crap ends up in brain and does consequential things.
Yes.
That's sort of like so icky. Like thinking about that makes me just go ick,
Yeah.
Because it's literally, when I said crap, I was like, it's literally crap. Like, it's the bad stuff in crap. The stuff that we're supposed to crap out. It's the stuff that's getting into our brain. That's disgusting. I'm not cool with that. I got to stop eating burgers, man. It's really hard to re-inoculate your gut health, though. Like, the most effective way. And this is what's also fascinating is when you get, there's that thing where you can get, what do they call it? Fecal transplants. Basically, you take someone else's poop that is healthy and you pump it into your gut, like for real, right? I mean, obviously you do this medically. You don't just like take someone's crap and put it in a syringe and stick it up there and go squirt, like. But they actually do that, and it can induce complete changes in the recipient's personality and physiology. So people that were fat can become thin. People that were thin can suddenly become fat. Energy levels change, personalities change. Like, the impact of this stuff is super profound. So it's unequivocally the case that if you change the gut flora and all the consequences of that, it has major impacts on who we are and how we present in the world, like how we exist and like what experiences we have. Like, like I struggle a little bit with weight. I've got like pretty bad gut health. If I was to squirt someone who's a skinny, it's not that simple though. Because if you squirt someone's skinnies, like really healthy, into someone who's also skinny, if it just happens to be a bit different, that person can then become fat because it knocks out, it dysregulates. But if you get it right, you could get a squirt of someone with a bunch of gut bacteria that I'm missing and can't re-inoculate with. So re-inoculate just like means reintroduce into my system. But if that could be just squirted in, that could then have all sorts of consequences on the balance of bacteria, which might actually then kill the pathogens or encourage the gut lining to like protect itself better because it's got all the things it needs. And these bacteria do things like that, like good, positive, they almost like gardeners, some of them and stuff. And then that would stop toxins getting into my blood, into the vagus nerves, into the brain, blah, blah, blah. I could potentially, if I had the right transport, stop being depressed and be skinny. And I'm like, So it's icky, but it's also like quite tempting. But the risk is also that I could get even worse.
Do they know what are the aspects of like the healthy poo or
No,
whatever?
this is all still being researched. So it's I think the number of variables at play is really high. So being able to control and make sure that you get the right thing passed over is, I think, very difficult. But they are researching it, and you can sign up. I think you can sign up for trials to be part of this, but I think you have to sign various bits of paper saying that, if you turn into a dumb fat, sorry, that's quite pejorative, but yeah, like, if your physiology and your neurology changes in ways that you didn't want, you can't sue them. So I think there's risk in doing this. But, in like 50 years or 20 years, this could be advanced to the point where, it might be sort of prescribed by healthcare.
Who would be the donors?
Fit people. You probably could make a killing. Like some people would just look after their bodies so well and go, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" "Oh, I'm a fecal donor." Like my job is to be so careful about my diet and my health that I
The
can
other people don't have to.
literally, like on behalf of a bunch of other people. I'm sure that there are people out there who'd be like, "Yeah, I'll do that. I'm already doing that. I'd love to get paid to do that." They're probably doing it already, the rich people over, like celebrities over there. I'd be interested. Anyway, this has gone slightly off tangent. You were telling us about, you were saying that the immune cells can get across the blood-brain
Yes,
barrier and
exactly.
therefore...
That in people with autism and ADHD, the highest comorbidity basically with autism and ADHD of more physical diagnoses is gastrointestinal syndrome. That's the highest comorbidity with neurodiversity of all physical kind of diagnoses. And that implies a worse barrier between the gut and the blood and other, like the rest of the body.
This is so interesting. I mean, like, we all know that isn't it interesting? We all know that diet's really important, but we're like, yeah, I know diet's really important, but I just love chips. And we all kind of know that we should be super healthy and that we're actually eating terrible food. Was it thingy produced hyper? What do they call it when food is? There's a phrase that they use: ultra processed, like ultra processed food. We know it's bad for us, but because we're dumb monkeys, we're just like, oh, saturated fats. That burger tastes so good. Oh, more cheese, please. And also, if you've got ADHD, that dopamine hunting for cheese is intense, right? Because cheese is full of stuff that actually is precursors to dopamine generation. So cheese gives us dopamine. That's why we love it so much. But cheese is also like the worst fast food that there is and full of bad stuff for our gut. Like it's really unhealthy, like the amount of oils and icky stuff.
Interesting note related to dopamine, now you mention it, which is that dopamine on immune cells, dopamine receptors are found. The dopamine system disturbances, dysregulation, is very likely to be linked to immune diseases.
So vitamin D is immune and dopamine is immune and gut is immune. And it's like all of this
There's
stuff is
literally
like...
dopamine receptors on immune cells.
And what does it do? Does it switch them on? Does it switch them off? Does it point them in the right... So in my analogy of, marauding Viking runners being marshaled around by high-vis people to make sure that they go to the right place, what does dopamine do to these marauding soldiers? Does it speed them up? Does it slow them down? Do we know? Or are we just like, oh, these guys soak up dopamine. I wonder what it does.
There's various too broad of a topic to give one answer to, I think, because there's various immune cells and also dopamine dysregulation has strong correlation to various immune diseases, for example, Parkinson's, MS.
That's crazy because Parkinson's and dementia and all that stuff is like also blood-brain barrier hypothesis around amoeba getting in. And if a certain type of amoeba gets into your brain, so it's like a single cell organism, a bit like a really mobile bacteria type thing, there's some evidence that there's a species or species plural of amoeba that gets in, and that's actually what causes Parkinson. Which one's the one where your brain like sort of starts melting away under you? Like it sort of eats, like literally eats your brain. I think of Parkinson's maybe, but certainly types of dementia. Okay, so that's related as well. So what is, in all of this, what is it that causes?
One of the things that people expect has a very large influence is the mother's immune system during the time that she's pregnant. Some studies, for example, state that in utero exposure to maternal antibodies and cytokines is a significant risk factor for autism, so that immune-related maternal factors can cross the placenta barrier and lead to neurodevelopmental disorders. There were also several other studies that have identified autoantibodies in autistic people that target regions like the prefrontal cortex, the cerebellum, and the hypothalamus.
So that's basically autoimmune response. Like I've got melanin, my body freaks out about my melanin. And what you're saying is that it's possible for the autoimmune response to go, thank God, those neurons aren't mine. I'm going to kill my own brain because I think it's not me.
Exactly.
Shit, that's vicious. It's like I'm going to melt from inside because
yeah,
that's
and
harsh.
I think that's about 5 studies that have found autoantibodies in the brain, including in cerebellum, which we already knew is very impacted in people with autism and ADHD.
And I would speculate that if those problematic cells are there during development, then it might prevent certain types, or it might get in the way of certain development. This is the stupidest metaphor I've ever come up with, but I'm like, imagine trying to build a house that's full of monkeys. It's just going to be harder to like paint the walls nicely and not like make a mess of things because it's full of monkeys. That is such a stupid metaphor. Okay, let me put it another way. Let's say that you're trying to plant a really beautiful garden, right? But your garden, right from the word go, has loads of like barbed wire all over the place, right? And like old industrial crap that's been discarded from somewhere, right? It's just going to be harder to make that garden beautiful grow as much as you could if that crap's already there. And if you didn't have that crap, you could maybe grow a nicer garden, have lots of different stuff going on, and maybe have some more freedom around it. So the little idea there is that crap in the garden, that barbed wire, is like the stuff that's got across the fetal barrier and that's been there right from the word go. So it affects your development, your fundamental ability to build a nice garden. Whereas people who don't have that have more freedom and go, oh, I'll just go, well, why don't you just put plants over there? Because there's a pile of barbed wire in the way. Well, move it. It's like, oh, where am I supposed to move it? So it's kind of just like, or trying to cook when you've got a baby on your arm. It's just harder.
The stuff, the intruders, the trash in the garden, I know, is being cleaned up by your immune system. But that means that there are immune cells needed in your brain to clean up all the stuff. But as we talked about last time, so previous episode, we talked about how one of the ways that autoimmune diseases develop is by an immune response. And by the immune response can create different ways of sparking autoimmune responses, because there's ways that kind of going to explode into an autoimmune disease. So if there's a lot of crap in the brain that needs cleaning up, then there will be immune cells cleaning that up.
They're just running amok.
Breaking down.
The Viking runners have got into the field and they've killed all the bad things in the field, and now they're ripping up all the crops. And you're like, hold on, we wanted to keep that, but there's not enough marshals around to get them back onto track. I always say this is a little bit tangential, but I'm reminded that teeth, right? Your teeth have blood in them and stuff, but for some reason your immune system can't get into your teeth, which means that when you get a bacterial infection in your teeth, your immune system cannot deal with it. So maybe there's a barrier there as well. I don't know any of the details here, but I have heard people say that you should never do like a root canal, because actually what you're doing is you're just letting the bacteria stay there, because nothing gets in, nothing can treat it, right? Nothing can do an immune response in there. So you're just allowing this cesspit of bacteria to do its thing in a tooth that you can no longer tell is under threat because you have no nerves in there, like giving you warning signs. But then, of course, that bacteria leaks. So you've got like a reservoir of permanent leaking stuff, and it's inside the danger triangle. There's a bit in like your face, your nose, your teeth and stuff, that they have a loop with the brain where when bad stuff gets in there, it gets into the brain really fast because there isn't a protection. And I think this is one of the reasons why teeth have this protection, is to stop stuff getting in. But yeah, I've heard it said that for this exact reason, you should actually take the tooth out, not root canal it, so that there really isn't any chance of having a little pack of bacteria just steadily breeding and leaking into your brain. So maybe there might be a correlation between tooth stuff and autism or neurodiverse impacts. I'm like, if this theory is true,
I think root canal, first of all, it shouldn't be done if not very much required for oral health. And wouldn't it also be similarly dangerous to remove the tooth? As in both cases, you expose the vessels and like everything that's underneath the teeth.
Yeah, it's not about the exposing. It's about the fact that the tooth can maintain a reservoir of bacteria in it. If it's not there, it can't maintain the reservoir. Like you'll heal over it, and your wound will close and heal, but your tooth keeps it open and a bacterial reservoir.
Right, but it should be filled, right? done properly.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, like I've got one and I'm pretty sure that my dentist fucked up because every now and then it hurts. It like flares up and it really hurts and then it goes away and then it comes back and I'm like, that feels a bit like, a bacterial explosion and then a die-off and then an explosion and then a die-off. My dentist was there. He was like, I think this is some of my best work ever. And I'm like, yeah, I think you fucked up. Bloody dentist, arrogant. Some of them, pretty arrogant. This one was pretty arrogant. Anyway.
There's probably higher chances of fucking up if you are doing a root canal instead of just removing the tooth.
But then also the question is like, well, if you remove a tooth, how do implants work? Because if you still want some tooth functionality there, you don't want a gap in your face, then you either do a root canal or a crown and stuff. So I got a root canal and a crown, or, you have an implant. And I don't know anything about whether the implant like trashes your blood-brain barrier. I think teeth are really interesting. And but if you go back far enough, like before sugar, people had great teeth. Skeletons are fine. And then sugar turns up and suddenly everyone's got utterly trash teeth. You can see it in the archaeological record. It's really pronounced. Like the two biggest problems for human beings in the history of our evolution are the invention of sugar and smartphones.
I noticed that my vocabulary and teeth is not that good.
It's a relatively niche subject matter. We'll say the Dutch. I might be able to do a translation.
No. What was I going to say? Yeah, that like the reason that we have holes in our teeth is that there's bacteria in your mouth that create acid from sugar, right? That's the whole reason. Apparently, these bacteria aren't there when you are born. So it's kind of like, it's very similar to like an STD. A person only gets it from the mouth of other people. So it probably happens when you're drinking from the same bottle as someone else. So that will happen at some point during your childhood.
So one of the biggest ways that babies understand intimacy or calculate how babies know who is intimate in their life and who should be trusted is saliva sharing. So when you share saliva, like babies recognize that that's an intimate person. So if you saliva share, if you're an uncle and you turn up and you do something that basically means that there's been some saliva sharing, babies' brains just know that means that you're like safe, you're like a looker after, you're a caregiver for them. And they're like, I now trust you. And if you refuse to do that, they're like, stranger. And it's like, it's a really dealing. So this saliva sharing is like, it has definite positives socially. And also it probably inoculates in certain ways. But what you're saying is it also has this negative consequence.
Everyone has this bacteria in your mouth because there only needs to be one point in your life where you need to like share saliva.
It's like we've all got lice in our eyelids, in our eyelashes. Like all of us have these, like literally every human being has them. It's impossible not to. And that has to come from another human being. So yes, basically we're disgusting creatures that are full of crap. Anyone who's got OCD listening to this, who's like, like someone who like washes their hands like religiously because they get the ick, they're gonna have switched off this episode a long time ago. But if they're still listening, I am so sorry, because this episode is super icky. Like we're basically talking about all the crap. We're going, okay, so neurodiversity is like maybe that we have a harder time with all this crap. Like we're dirtier, or no, we're more sensitive to dirt. And what you going to do about this, right? You can't just like sort of scrub. No amount of soap is like. I sort of have this image that someone's going to go, oh god, ick. So an autistic person will be like, right, I'm mouthwashing so hard right now. It's like it probably won't. Will it?
That actually brings me to the last point that I wanted to make, which is also noted by multiple studies, which is that several clinical trials have shown the effectiveness of corticosteroids and immunosuppressive drugs on improving behaviors. So actually like tested behaviors on scales of measuring autistic symptoms.
Do you know what?
No.
In the last few years, I've had some motorbike accidents where I've like snapped ribs and stuff. And one of the reasons I got my startup started was because I was on hardcore painkillers that I think might have been steroidal painkillers, or maybe, right? Which is why you don't want to stay on them too long, right? But I swear that I could just do things. Like I was so capable when I was, and it was like I was a different person. Like I just didn't have overwhelming. My brain wasn't noisy. I was just able to make progress on the things that I decided to make progress on. There was no internal fight. There was no struggle. It was just like, I'm going to do this thing now. And I would just do it. And it was so gorgeous. And it was so obvious because I've basically 3 years of the last 4, I've had this experience because I've kind of just been trashing myself for the last 4 years for some reason. And I'm like, there's a part of me, it's like, if I could have enough of these things to stay on them and they didn't have any negative consequences, I'd be like, oh man, that'd be nice. But they're not like amphetamines. They're not like ADHD meds. They're just painkillers, but they make life possible.
Yeah, there have been clinical trials exactly stating this, that stuff which is actually directed at the immune system, or, well, in your case, painkillers, but I suppose they're kind of in the same.
I wonder whether there's an overlap or not. Yeah, because it could be a different mechanism. But you don't want to suppress your immune system because that's really dangerous, because then you get a cut and you die from sepsis. I think this is one of those situations where the negative comes with the good, right? It's like emotions. If you have emotions, you can have the happy ones and the sad ones. And you can be like, oh, I'm going to try and stop having sad emotions. You take, some prescribed medication to stop having sad emotions, and boom, you also lose all your happy emotions, because for the emotional system to work, it needs to have its dynamic range. It needs to be allowed to have its variation. And there's an element where it's like, how do you get rid of the bad stuff without throwing out the baby with the bathwater, without losing all the good stuff? The saliva sharing is probably really important for reasons, like we love our, trans fatty acids in our burgers. It makes us feel really good. Like, if you got rid of all that, you'd have really fucking boring food. I've been there, tried it. It's pretty boring. Like, it takes some getting used to. And then I fell off the wagon and started eating stuff again. Because that's always the question that sort of turns up, isn't it? After 15 minutes of talking, it's like, so all this stuff is there, but what can we do about it? I mean, is it like diet, mouthwash, and keep breaking legs so that you can justify being on painkillers? Is that the strategy?
It's a good question. Apparently, mouthwash is really bad for the mouth, actually, by the way.
I suspect it throws everything out of kilter. Like, I suspect it dysregulates everything. Like, it just throws everything out.
And the body is pretty good at regulating the mouth. And
it's almost like the inoculation thing with the fecal transplants that we were talking about earlier on. It's like our instinct to solve this stuff is to like turn up with like antibiotics, for example, right? And we just nuke it and go, that'll get rid of the bad stuff, but we get rid of all the good stuff at the same time. Like, this is such a human response. It's like, oh no, there's something bad here. I will destroy everything. It's like the more skillful approach, but maybe the harder approach, which is why we don't do it so willingly, it's because it's really hard, is to like the permaculture approach in gardening and farming. It's to go, look, we're not going to destroy anything. We're just going to very judiciously and selectively and wisely add the right things that will naturally move the ecosystem over into self-regulating patterns. And we have to add the right good things, and then it will do its own. And I think human beings don't like doing that a lot of the time because it's not control. Like, it's delayed reward. It's not immediate, and you're not in control. You have to kind of like wait and be patient, and you have to give a lot of power away. And humans do quite like to be impatient and immediate. Like, we're a bit like graspy monkeys. We just want to do it now, and that's not a good strategy, So maybe the wisest solution is the most annoying one, which is patiently build up your positive diet. Patiently go and do, appropriate levels of exercise for reasons that we haven't talked about today, but in other episodes we've mentioned. Maybe don't get root canals and do something else there. I don't know. Maybe not. What was the other ones we had? Take your vitamin D. Take your
MK2.
Maybe sign up for a fecal transplant trial.
Don't get a baby.
Yeah, don't be born. Just don't be born. Don't have been a baby. Don't be in a womb. Don't come from testicles. Choose non-autistic parents. This is an interesting sort of keystone idea. I would be really interested to find out how do these barriers fail and get damaged? Can we find anything out about that? Because if there is something that we can do that supports healthy blood something barriers, then, maybe that gives us a hint on, in the permaculture idea, what would be the good thing to introduce to allow that part of us to work better? Or is it the case that once it's bust, it's bust? To be continued next time.
To be continued.
See you then. Thanks for listening to our podcast today. If you like what we're talking about and want to hear more, do like, follow, and subscribe. It makes a really big difference. You can also find us on social media and our Patreon, Al and Meryl, or our website, alandmeryl.com. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.